The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Regal Lakes.
Here we go.
David Johnston is in a clear conflict of interest. He was a member of the Trudeau Foundation and he's a friend of the Prime Minister's. He released a report meant to whitewash Beijing's influence with the Liberal government and Beijing's interference in our elections. But this whitewash is what he was always going to do, wasn't it? After all, he's there as a special advisor exclusively for the Prime Minister. Canadians have rejected Johnston's cover-up, and they want the facts from this Prime Minister. Will he call a public inquiry today?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities.
Madam Speaker, while foreign state actors are trying to undermine our democracy, the members of the Conservative Party are actually assisting when they stand there and spread and take personal attacks about those who are serving our country to bring forward reports on how we can move forward with better measures to improve our democratic institutions. A member opposite talked about facts. If they care about facts, Madam Speaker, their leaders should get the briefing and learn the facts about the foreign interference.
Then he would be silenced, you idiot.
Order. I want to remind members that when someone has the floor, nobody else has should be speaking. I think that we have to afford that respect. The honourable
Madam Speaker is actually the worst.
The Parliamentary Secretary wants facts. Here's a fact: a majority of members of this House, representing a majority of Canadians, voted to have a public inquiry and to fire David Johnston. But this Prime Minister continues to ignore that in favour of his cover-up man, his ski buddy, his friend, his Beijing-funded Trudeau Foundation board member.
He wanted to call him his bitch.
Straight through this sham, and they want information, and that's why this House voted for a public inquiry. The Prime Minister might not like it, but that's what this House called for. Will he call one today?
Hear, hear. Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, Canadians can see when it comes to matters of national security, the Conservatives are just not fit to lead. They are immature when it comes to these matters. Rather than talking about the actual measures and recommendations in the Right Honourable David Johnston's report, instead, if you listen to that member's question, it was nothing but personal political attacks, Madam Speaker. It was not about the interests in Canadians and
well, this is politics.
Institutions. It's about partisan games for the Conservatives. On this side of the House, we're going to focus on protecting Canadian democracy.
Hear, hear.
I feel like she's going to go make some bread by hand.
The Parliamentary Secretary wants to protect Canadian democracy. She would have her Prime Minister call a full public independent inquiry. That is what this House has twice voted to do. The Special Rapporteur declined to do so, saying that he doesn't work for Parliament. He's not accountable to Parliament. He works only for the Prime Minister. Everyone agrees we need a public inquiry, except for those who work for the Liberal government or work for the Trudeau Foundation. Canadians want a public inquiry. This House has twice voted for one. Will the Liberals do the right thing and call a full public inquiry?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, how could we take lessons from the party opposite when they won't even take the basic minimum national security briefing on this very matter? Madam Speaker, the Conservatives would rather operate under a veil of ignorance. We expect all members of this House to come forward. Opposition parties may criticize our government, but Canadians expect them to at least do so with information and the facts. While Conservatives ignore to take briefings on national security, we can't take them very seriously.
Still hearing a hum. I'm not sure if those individuals are having conversations. If they are, they might want to take them out instead, because we want to hear what the speakers have to say when they are being recognized, whether individuals like it or not.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. You know what the Prime Minister and the Special Rapporteur have in common? Many things. The Trudeau Foundation, old friendship, a ski chalet, and especially a disdain for the House of Commons. Prime Minister Trudeau and David Johnston are causing harm to the credibility of our democratic institution. Will the Prime Minister put national security first and fire the Special Rapporteur?
L'honorable député.
The honourable member knows very well that he cannot name the Prime Minister by name, and so I think he should check his questions before he asks them. The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, the recommendations in Mr. Johnson's report may not be popular,
biased.
But they are their recommendations that are courageous.
And all three party leaders disagree.
Madam Speaker, we have a responsibility to
want a
treat
public
national
inquiry.
Security information seriously, to ensure the safety of people who collect that information, to ensure that we work with our allies who trust us with secret information. So the responsible thing to do for people on the opposition side is to go and get their national security briefing and to come back here and discuss things that are fact-based. The honourable member. I saw the facts, Madam Speaker. David Johnston is a former Governor General. He did very well in that role, but we know full well that the Parliament and the House of Commons is the House of the people. There is nothing honourable when a former Governor General becomes the puppet of the Prime Minister to protect him from a public inquiry that has now been called for twice by a majority of parliamentarians in this chamber. The Prime Minister put David Johnson in this position himself. When will he dismiss him? The Honourable Minister of Sport. Madam Speaker, Mr. Johnston was, honourable and reliable and credible to be appointed by the Harper government to be Governor General and by the Mulroney government to conduct inquiries. So all of a sudden, because the conclusions of David Johnston don't suit the Conservatives, someone who has spent his life serving Canadians is being denounced by the opposition, and that is irresponsible. The honourable member for Avignon-Lemitis-Matane-Matapétia. Madam Speaker,
NDP.
The forest fires have caused a state of emergency in Sept-Îles where 10,000 people have been evacuated and 1,000 people have been evacuated from Chapet. Madam Speaker, the Bloc Québécois is offering its full support and solidarity to these people and these communities. Today, these people need to know that all governments are with them to help them weather this crisis. Does the federal government pledge to support, by all means, the efforts of Quebec and local authorities to fight these raging forest fires?
The fires are out of control. People should really stop arsoning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question. Indeed, we are collaborating fully with the province of Quebec. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Sept-Îles and other people who are for whom the fire is threatening, and there are 20 fires raging out of control in Quebec right now, and we are still waiting for an official request from the province for support, but we know that Quebec has an excellent intervention team to come to the assistance of its citizens. The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Madam Speaker, foreign interference. That is the essence, but the problem is what China has done and how Mr. Johnson is preventing us from dealing with it. Because under his report, the Chinese-run police stations won't be investigated. Neither will the intimidation of the Chinese diaspora or the threats against elected officials. It's probably it's better to shed light on something than to keep it in the dark. So let's shed light on these matters and call for an independent public inquiry. The Honourable Minister of Sport. Madam Speaker, when I see
why are they so against a public inquiry?
The exact same position as the leader of the Conservatives.
It's what all the parties want.
Is to prefer willful blindness instead of getting his security clearance and repeating and receiving a briefing that would allow to shed light on these matters. All I can think of is that the Bloc Québécois is a pale blue copy of the Conservatives now.
Ooh.
North Island Powell River.
Nothing wrong with that.
Across Canada, forest fires are burning. This may be the worst season yet. In my riding, there is a forest fire near Sayward Village. I want to thank all the firefighters who have stepped up across our region to help, and to Mayor Baker for sharing updates with me. The leadership in the community is working hard to keep everyone safe. Climate change is impacting small communities in particular. With their limited resources and funds, the challenges will only grow. How will this government support small communities as climate change creates these new realities?
Hear, hear.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire du Premier ministre.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague as well for her question. We know that climate change has a direct impact on Canadians, and with the forest fires, the government is monitoring all forest fires in Canada during this summer season, and we're working closely with our provincial and territorial counterparts to ensure that they have all the support and tools they need. We even have called in Australia and the United States, and so I'd like to assure them of our full collaboration so that we can weather this crisis. Thank you.
For Windsor West.
When Canada had an auto policy, being the Auto Pact, we were number 2 in the world in manufacturing, the hub of investment, research, and development. When the Conservatives and Liberals signed NAFTA, they allowed us to get bullied by Japan and the WTO, and without a fight, we gave up our best trade agreement in history. The result is we have dropped to 15th in the world behind Indonesia, now tied with the Czech Republic and Slovakia for auto assembly. The Windsor Stellantis future and investment has played out in all the media as the Deputy PM and Premier negotiate in the headlines. Will this government show real leadership, ditch the drama, public
leadership,
sign a deal with Stellantis, and bring in a real auto policy that doesn't embarrass us and puts workers first?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I want to thank my colleague for his advocacy for the automobile industry in Canada and his hard work on the industry committee to do the same. He knows very well that our auto industry is crucial to the Canadian economy and the hundreds of thousands of Canadians that work in that sector. That's why the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry worked tirelessly to...
Point of order, it seems like there's no interpretation. C'est bien ça? Is it working? It working now? Okay. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, if you can restart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my friend and colleague from the Industry Committee for his advocacy for the Canadian automobile industry and his good work on the committee. He knows that the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry has worked tirelessly.
He's wearing conservative colors
For Canada's auto industry. We continue to negotiate in good faith.
Even the Liberals want to be conservatives.
And the Government of Ontario. And through it all, our top priority is going to be getting the best possible deal for Canadians.
Honourable Member for St. Albert Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor testified that her office and 3 deputy ministers received a memo warning that a sitting member of Parliament and his family were being targeted by Beijing. A memo that went into a black hole, but according to her, no one is responsible. It's the Prime Minister's job to run the machinery of government, and he has special responsibilities when it comes to national security. So will he finally step up and accept responsibility for this colossal failure under his watch?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities.
Madam Speaker, we will never tolerate foreign state actors attempting to intimidate, whether it's members of this House, members of diaspora communities, or any Canadians. We take this matter extremely seriously. David Johnson's report has indicated areas that need improvement in policy and communication. We take that work extremely seriously. The Prime Minister, prior to the release of the report, said we would implement those recommendations. We're looking at that very closely. The Minister of Public Safety is going to make sure that gaps like that are closed.
Hear, hear.
St. Albert Edmonton.
Here.
Madam Speaker, consistent with the Prime Minister not taking responsibility, one of his ministers claims that he isn't responsible for not reviewing a memo sent to his attention warning that the member for Wellington Halton Hills was being targeted by Beijing. He blames CSIS instead. Cover up, denial, and blame. The Liberal story just doesn't add up. Why do these Liberals expect all of the power and none of the responsibility?
Oh, yeah.
Carrie.
That is true.
The issue of foreign interference is extremely seriously. It's not new, and it's certainly not unique to Canada, but it is precisely why from 2015 we implemented a number of measures to deal with the attempted foreign interference in our democracy. We will never accept it. We are going to continue to strengthen our democratic institutions as well as our national security community to ensure information is properly shared with those who need it. Madam Speaker, while the Conservatives do nothing and just play politics, we take this seriously.
Vermont Dundas, South Glengarry.
They do not take it seriously.
Tax wasn't driving up gas and grocery bills enough. They've now decided that Canadians need a second carbon tax on the price of fuel. The independent parliamentary budget officer laid out these new tax hikes clearly. 41 cents a litre with the first carbon tax, and now the second carbon tax is going to add an additional 17 cents a litre. And then, of course, they're going to tax the tax by putting GST on their carbon tax. 61 cents a litre in new taxes. When will the Liberals and NDP just axe the tax?
Yeah. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Madam Speaker, let me demonstrate the height of Conservative hypocrisy. In their Conservative platform in the 2021 election, they state, and I quote, "We recognize the most efficient way to reduce our emissions is to use pricing mechanisms." Another excerpt on the clean fuel standard.
There seems to be an issue with being able to understand what the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary is responding to. I'm sure, order, I'm sure that the Honourable Member wants to hear the answer so he can ask a subsequent answer. The Honourable Member for
Madam Speaker,
Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Not good at her job.
Well, Madam Speaker, this is pretty tough medicine for the Conservatives, but let me quote from page 79 to 80 of the Conservative platform. "We'll finalize and improve the clean fuel regulations to reduce carbon emissions from every litre of gasoline." That sounds an awful lot like we're doing on this side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker. When will the Conservatives stop the hypocrisy and get serious about climate change?
For Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
The Liberals don't have an environmental plan, they have a tax plan, because the fact is they have never met a target on climate change they've ever set. All it is doing is skyrocketing food prices in this country. They are taxing farmers who grow food. They are taxing truckers who ship it. And they are taxing the businesses in restaurants that sell it. Ontario families are going to be out $2,300 a year under this Liberal NDP scheme. When are they finally going to realize that they're the ones causing the cost of living crisis, that their environmental plan is non-existent? Just scrap the tax and help Canadians.
The Honourable Minister of Tourism.
Member's question, but I want to take us back 7 years ago and a day when, for the first time in Canadian history, we raised the pride flag on Parliament Hill. We made history. We stood up for Canadians.
Here we go.
Members from every house.
And now you've replaced the Canadian flag with the pride flag.
To do that very thing, and I want to thank all 2S LGBTQI+ members of this House, our allies and our champions, staff, and the new Canadian Pride Caucus for getting this work done. On the substantive issue of the matter is raised, he should check his party platform in 2021 when they ran on a price on pollution.
Nobody's against gay people. Nobody's against gay people. Do not replace the Canadian flag, which is what represents this country and unites all people, disabled, different colors, different genders, different sexual preferences. Nobody gives a shit. You live in Canada, it's a Canadian flag. You want a different flag? Go somewhere else. Don't replace the Canadian flag with the pride flag. Not even for a day. It's just so disheartening. It's just so rude to do that.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, I can assure this House and the Minister that everyone here on this side of the House are 100% in agreement of the defence of two LGBTQI rights. What we can also be sure of, Madam Speaker, is that unfortunately the people on that side invented a new tax to further tax Canadians and put more money in their pockets. And so Canadians are trying to deal with inflation. For the average Quebec family, it's going to cost $436 more per year. Now, seriously, can the minister tell us that this new tax is a good idea, whereas people can't even make ends meet? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, the Honourable colleague on the other side knows that if he wants to ease things for Canadians, all they have to do is stop the filibuster and support the BIA in order to make things cheaper for Canadians. But with regard to the price on pollution, the Conservative platform from 2021 says that the number of or rather, fuel is going to be something we're going to put a price on pollution on. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, on this side of the House, we got a lot more votes than they did, even though they formed government. The other reality, Madam Speaker, is that just a few months ago, someone said that the deficit and the out-of-control spending are throwing oil on the inflationary fires. You know who said that, Madam Speaker? The Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and the Minister of Finance. And yet a few months later, she presented a budget that increased the deficit and spending. So seriously, once again, can the Minister tell us that $436 more for Canadian families is more difficult and a bad idea for everyone? Madam Speaker, there are so many concepts in that question that I'm going to address as many of them as possible. Madam Speaker, the former PBO, Kevin Page, said clearly that our budget is extremely balanced, extremely responsible, and should not create inflation in Canada. But in addition, Madam Speaker, let us look at the Conservatives' election platform that said we will be assessing the progress of the carbon price on something like $160 per ton. What's happening on the other side? So it's done for them. The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville.
Let's go, Block.
Speaker, next Saturday is the second anniversary of a recommendation from all parties in this House on EI reform, all parties, including the Liberals. And 2 years later, absolutely nothing has been done. All the parties concluded, though, in this report that the EI system is no longer adapted to the... There seems to be a problem with the interpretation.
So?
I don't know. It sounded pretty good.
Is the interpreting working now?
Oui.
Yes, it is.
Dude, Block is pretty base.
Start a question again.
I love it.
With pleasure, Madam Speaker. On next Saturday is the second anniversary of a vote that was held in this House, and all parties voted unanimously to reform the EI system. All the parties, including the Liberals, and yet 2 years later, absolutely nothing has been done. All the parties concluded in this report that the EI system is no longer adapted to the labour market reality. In other words, the Liberals have admitted 2 years ago already that they were turning their backs on workers with an obsolete EI system. When are they going to act? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Labour.
Very much. EI is currently one of the oldest and most complex systems across the Government of Canada. That's why we made a commitment to fully modernize the system. In the past 2 years, the Minister has led more than 35 virtual national and regional roundtables with workers, employers, and academics. We have also engaged the provinces and territories, as well as Indigenous organizations, in separate consultations. We have already extended sickness benefits from 15 to 26 weeks, and with the Board of Appeal and Budget 2023, we will put EI appeal decisions back into the hands of workers. EI reform is a priority, Speaker, and we're on it, and we're going to get it done. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Madam Speaker, there are many corrections that I could make to that answer, but what I wanted to say is this is not the only anniversary to be underscored in terms of Liberal dishonesty. Remember, the Prime Minister himself ordered an EI reform by summer 2022. The heat of the past few days reminds us that it was a year ago and the Liberals still haven't done a thing. So 2 years after having promised this reform and 1 year after the deadline that the Prime Minister himself set, nothing has changed. Madam Speaker, keeping one's word is a minimum of respect. So when will the Liberals... The Honourable Minister of Sport. Madam Speaker, I'm very proud that the government has supported workers during the pandemic, even though that was not covered by EIs.
Then they clawed everything back.
We're still able to receive money instead of not being
That's
able to
ridiculous.
feed their families. And with regard to EI reform, there are things that were put into the budget to reduce the cost of living and to increase health transfers. But we did hold consultations, and the work is ongoing, Madam Speaker.
Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Madam Speaker, Canadians are not just hungry, they're hangry at the price of groceries. This Minister of Finance is pouring an additional $60 billion over the inflationary fire. The food professor says that overspending by government is to blame, and he said, I quote, "When a government injects more money into the economy, the excess liquidity can drive up demand for goods, including food, which can in turn lead to higher prices." Does the Minister of Finance feel guilty that her large deficits are hurting Canadians' ability to feed themselves, or is she secretly trying to start a national weight loss challenge?
Hear, hear. Le ministre de
Holy shit!
That I could maybe lose, 5 or 10, but as it comes to that member's question, what's real is if they want to help Canadians, they can stop the filibuster in this chamber today, they can show up for work, and they can make sure, Madam Speaker, that the Budget Implementation Act passes and that supports get to Canadians who need them. The hypocrisy on that side is making things smell in this House. It's not just the heat, it's the Conservatives who are blocking this Parliament.
Hear, hear. Whoa. We were doing not too bad, and all of a sudden it just picked up. I would ask members to
Madam Speaker, shut up.
Change the speaking order. The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Madam Speaker, the minister's clearly misinformed. The committee has already passed the bill, and there's no filibuster. So, that's right. Madam Speaker, on the topic, inflation is like a bad house guest that just won't leave. No matter how many hints the Conservatives, economists, and even the Governor of the Bank of Canada dropped to stop spending so much, this Minister of Finance keeps pumping another $60 billion on top of last year's record deficit, which only increases the inflation, house guests to stay, and makes it even bigger mess of the economy. Will the Minister of Finance finally take a hint, reduce spending, or is she so tired of her job that she wants voters to show her and her unwanted house guests the door?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism.
Speaker, if the Conservatives would read the budget, they would see that there are measures to make sure that we reduce spending by $15 billion over the next years. Madam Speaker, also in the Budget Implementation Act, we would be able to make sure that Canada worker benefits go to Canadians faster. It would improve the education savings plans, and it would lower the tax burden for tradespeople. Madam Speaker, the Conservatives don't like that we stabilize healthcare for a generation, that we're making historic investments to grow the economy, and that we're also helping those Canadians who need it the most. They want to use dilatory tactics. We're going to keep delivering for Canadians.
Hear, hear. King Vaughan.
Madam Speaker, our national holiday, Canada Day, will be observed by Canadians in less than 1 month. This is a day when we all gather to celebrate our nation. However, most Canadians are more concerned with the high cost of living. If the first carbon tax wasn't harsh enough, the Liberals' birthday gift to Canadians is a second carbon tax, which will intend to destroy Canada Day festivities. Will this government show some compassion and give all Canadians the gift they deserve and axe this costly carbon tax?
Holy smokes, lady.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
She's got quite the pipes.
Climate change.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And yes, July 1st is a great day to celebrate in Canada. There's another reason to celebrate, Madam Speaker, because that's the day when the climate action rebate will come out. Those payments will come quarterly, Madam Speaker. In my home province, it's $1,000 a year, $250 a quarter, Madam Speaker. It's going to fight climate change, it's going to support affordability, and it's going to be a great day for Canadians indeed, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Speaker, this Liberal government has no shortage of imagination when it comes to making life miserable for those who drive their car to work or take a summer road trip with their family. They've already imposed a carbon tax which adds 41 cents to a litre of gas, and now carbon tax 2 will add another 17 cents to that same litre of gas. Compounded with GST, that's an extra 61 cents per litre during the worst cost of living crisis since Pierre Trudeau. When will these Liberals see and scrap both of these punitive carbon taxes?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, it's indeed puzzling that every single person on that side of the aisle supported putting a price on pollution in the 2021 campaign. Madam Speaker, the member for Wellington-Halton Hills, much admired in this chamber, made it the centerpiece of his Conservative leadership campaign in 2017. But get this, Madam Speaker, the MP for Pitt Meadows Maple Ridge actually introduced the first carbon tax in North America. And I have a good report, Madam Speaker. It was success, the economy grew, and more money was put into BC pockets. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable member for London Fanshawe.
The NDP leader and I just joined a rally for Webster Street tenants last week. After living in their apartments for years, they are facing rent evictions by a new corporate landlord. When the tenants organized, the owner threatened to tag and tow their cars for not paying a new $200 parking fee. This Liberal government has allowed corporate landlords to drive up London rents. The average cost for a one-bedroom is up 28% in a single year. Will this government create a housing acquisition fund to make rent affordable in London?
Honourable Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion.
Madam Speaker, I agree with the honourable member that we need to take action to support renters. That is precisely why our government introduced the Canada Housing Benefit, which is delivering rent supports to tens of thousands of families right across our country. This Canada Housing Benefit is now live in every province and territory in Canada. In addition to that, we had a top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit. In addition to that, we're building more affordable...
I don't know about you guys, but I never received any of these rebates.
Contact the provincial government, who's responsible for rent control.
Honourable member for South Okanagan West Kootenay.
Madam Speaker, natural disasters, including wildfires and floods fueled by climate change, are making it difficult to get home insurance. Canadians can't buy a home when there's an active wildfire within 50 kilometres, and that covers most of the summer in BC. 10% of Canadians can't get flood insurance, and Canada is the only major country where the government doesn't have a backstop for earthquake insurance. Canadians can't afford to wait while their homes and businesses are destroyed, so will the Liberals act to make sure Canadians have the insurance protection they need?
Hear, hear. L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire pour le ministre.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister, pardon me.
Come on, Madam Speaker, you have one job.
Economic Development.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for raising this issue. We should, every parliamentarian, take very seriously the risks caused by climate change. Our government is there, as always, to support all Canadians and Indigenous people in order to help them prepare for future threats, including issues with insurance. We know full well that it's more and more difficult. The insurability of neighborhoods, homes, villages, we will be there to support them when the...
...to prevent gun violence and keep their loved ones safe. How is this government taking action to deliver for the safety of Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the question. Gun violence, Madam Speaker, has no place in our communities. We are taking the strongest action in a generation, Madam Speaker, to keep our communities safe. Today, on June 2nd, we're marking the first National Day Against Gun Violence here in this great nation of Canada. Going forward, on the first Friday of June, Madam Speaker, we'll raise awareness around the tragedies caused by gun violence and remember the
How about the tragedies
survivors
caused by these soft-on-crime policies?
Our plan to get firearms off our streets and invest in prevention. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Why don't you just ban crime?
Speaker, Canada's tourism sector and Canadians who enjoy traveling are under attack by this Liberal government's out-of-control spending and tax hikes. A recent Ipsos report found 6 in 10 Canadians are now planning to scale back their summer vacation plans. Yet this Liberal government continues to hike taxes, like adding a second carbon tax to the price of gas, which will add 17 cents per litre. Does this government not realize their taxes add up and will ultimately hurt Canada's tourism industry and our chances of achieving a full tourism recovery?
Yes, it is.
Madam Speaker, I respect the honourable member who is my tourism critic, but you know, Madam Speaker, something doesn't add up because he voted against supporting the tourism industry in the budget, but yet he voted for pricing on carbon in the last campaign. So I don't know what they drink in Niagara, but Madam Speaker, I know worse.
Can't hear the answer, and I'm sure that the honourable member wants to hear the answer because he's going to want to probably pose another question. So I would ask members to please hold off on their thoughts, on allowing their thoughts to be loud. So the honourable member for Minister of Tourism, if he can start.
Speaker, I find it a little odd that the tourism critic for the Conservatives voted against supporting the tourism industry in the budget, and yet he voted for a price on pollution when he ran for the last election. So we're going to let him explain that to his constituents. But I can tell you, I was at Rendezvous Canada this week in Quebec City, Madam Speaker, and the tourism sector in this country is going to be back not in 26, not in 25, not in 24, but the end of 2023. Thanks to Canadians, thanks to what we have to offer, thanks to the international community knowing that Canada's back and they want to come and see us.
I'm still hearing some heckling going on, and I would just ask those members to please not do that. The honourable member for Niagara Falls.
Madam Speaker, that's an interesting response. Surely a tourism minister knows that travel is a discretionary activity. Adding 41 cents a litre to the gas through the first carbon tax won't help. A second Liberal carbon tax of 17 cents will not hurt as well. Add GST on that, and we have a tax on a tax on a tax. Canadians need tax relief, not another tax. When will this Liberal government axe the tax and help the tourism sector recover fully this year?
Just for that, you get another tax.
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, it's so nice to have so many friends from the Blue team from Alberta in the chamber on a Friday, but I can say to my colleague from Niagara that, you know, in this budget, $158 million directly to the tourism sector, $1.8 billion to do exactly what he said, which is to get more people to come to Canada for CATSA, for modernization of the airports. But Madam Speaker, how did he and his entire Conservative caucus vote against the tourism sector, against airports, against getting people to our country? Shame on them.
Shame on them.
Order, order, order. If members want to have cross debate, then they should leave the chamber. Order, order.
I'll remind everybody to give a like if you haven't already, and just check to see if you're subscribed.
The honourable member for Essex.
Speaker, the Liberals already have one carbon tax in place that will add 41 cents a litre of gas. Carbon tax 2 will add another 17 cents to a litre of gas. Add the GST on top, and that's an extra 61 cents to a litre of gas. Speaker, when will the NDP Liberal costly coalition realize that it is out of touch and Canadians are out of patience and out of money?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, the Conservatives campaigned on putting a price on pollution. But you know what the Conservatives never want to talk about, Madam Speaker, is the cost of climate change. Madam Speaker, there are 1,600 fires burning in our country at the moment. People from the suburbs of Halifax are being evacuated. The costs of climate change are real, Madam Speaker. They are rising. When are the Conservatives going to get serious about climate change?
After 8 years with this Prime Minister, businesses in Beauce are struggling to find workers. Small and medium businesses in the farming sector are starting to close their doors because of backlogs at IRCC and endless paperwork. When I arrived in 2019, I asked for relief from labour market studies. With an unemployment rate of 1.9% in my region, we needed help to fill important positions.
And you probably just got
The
taxed.
Liberals refusing to help businesses in Beauce. The Honourable Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food. Madam Speaker, it's quite the opposite. Farmers in Quebec and throughout Canada know that our government is there to help them. I'm constantly communicating with them. I spoke with the president of the Union des producteurs agricoles yesterday. Things with our programs are going particularly well. We continue to work our colleagues in employment in order to improve processes. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Madam Speaker, there's another flood of complaints to the Commissioner of Official Languages, and Air Canada takes the podium again with 76 complaints about its failure to serve customers in French.
Government subsidized.
Let's talk about the annual champion, the federal government. No fewer than 714 complaints against Ottawa itself for abandoning French in its bilingual public service job postings. That's triple the number from the previous year. How can businesses like Air Canada improve if the federal government is setting this kind of example? The Honourable Minister for Official Languages. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his question. I also want to thank the Commissioner for Official Languages for his report, which he tabled this week, and we accept the recommendations. As the Minister for Official Languages, I'm very pleased with the work that we've accomplished up until now. We've seen passage of Bill C-13, and I thank everyone who supported the bill. I'm looking forward to royal assent, but let's not forget that we've made historic investments, $4.1 billion, to support official language minority communities and to support or to shore up the decline of French. The member for La Pointe de l'Île. Madam Speaker, of course, we're going to monitor the impact of C-13 on companies like Air Canada. But in the case of the public service, the employers who need to be made accountable are them, the ministers here in the House. They don't need C-13 to enforce using French. They just need to stop treating their own French-speaking employees like second-class citizens. Will they send a clear message to the senior members of the public service that there will be severe consequences if the situation of French doesn't improve drastically in the next few months?
Block stands for something.
The Honourable Minister for Official Languages. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Let's be clear. We're the first government to recognize the decline of French in this country, and that's why we went forward with a bill that's ambitious and that has teeth. Not only that, we've made historic investments, $4.1 billion, to ensure that the federal government will indeed do its fair share to protect and promote French throughout the country. And let's not forget that the Commissioner for Official Languages will now have many more tools to do their work and ensure that they can play the role of watchdog to protect our official languages.
Speaker, we all know the facts. Violent crime, up 32%.
Yep.
Gang-related killings, up 92%. And worst of all, 10 police officers killed in the line of duty in recent months. It's clear that the Liberals' crime agenda has failed again. The only thing this divisive government has united Canadians on is how bad the bail system is after they broke it. That's right. Why is it every time Liberals are in charge, hardworking citizens and law-abiding gun owners are punished, while dangerous repeat offenders get to ride the merry-go-round of the revolving door of justice?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the
funny how that works.
Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, Canadians deserve to feel safe and be safe. That's why we introduced Bill C-48, a target.
That's why we should get rid of Liberals.
designed to focus on violent repeat offenders, gun and knife violence, as well as intimate partner violence. This bill is a product of collaboration with the provinces and territories, Madam Speaker, and I want to quote from the Canadian Associations of Chiefs of Police, who said, "We are convinced that the legislative changes put forward by Bill C-48 will go a long way to help eliminate the preventable harm and senseless tragedies attributable to violent and repeat offenders across Canada." I invite the Conservative Party
for Kelowna Lake Country.
Trudeau government. Violent crime is up 32.
Honourable member knows that she can't name individuals, members of parliament or ministers by their names or first name.
Little slip up.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After 8 years of this Liberal government, violent crime is up 32%, and our most vulnerable citizens are some of the most impacted. People are in desperate situations without being able to afford basic necessities, with high inflation, rent costs doubling, and mental health and addiction issues rising. It was just yesterday in this House that I spoke about the homelessness issue being on the rise, with safety concerns surrounding homeless encampments. And this morning, we hear about the death of a woman following a reported shooting at a tent encampment in Peterborough. When will this government take public safety seriously?
The Honourable Minister for Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to just repeat what I was saying earlier, Madam Speaker. With Bill C-48 that we introduced a couple of weeks ago, we have near unanimous support from across provinces as well as police leadership. I want to quote again from the Chiefs of Police of Canada, and it quotes, we commend the governments for acting on the urgency for legislative change and for recognizing that our amendments were important. We are convinced that the legislative changes put forth in Bill C-48 will go a long way to help eliminate the preventable harm and senseless tragedies attributable to violent and repeat offenders, Madam Speaker.
L'honorable député de Montmagny, Lisleck, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup.
Madame la Présidente, depuis que
Madam Speaker, since this Prime Minister took office, violent crime has risen by 32%. And just a little reminder, under the Conservative government, saw crime rate go down by 23%. This situation is directly linked to the government's lax policies. Criminals get released on bail with disconcerting ease. Will the Prime Minister finally get the message and make changes to put an end to the revolving door system in our prison system? It's like we're at a hotel.
Oh, that's so sad. That is so true. It's so sad.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Méritez de vous santé et d'être.
Oh, dude, speak English.
Everyone deserves to feel safe.
We introduced
Speak English, please.
Targeted reform to our bail laws, designed to focus on violent repeat offenders, gun and knife violence, as well as intimate partner violence. If I may, Madam Speaker, repeat what I said earlier. This is from the Canadian Police Association, and their comment on C-48 is nous apprécions que le ministre
Oh, my God.
We appreciate that the Minister worked in collaboration with the parties to present this bill.
Honorable député de Pontiac.
Yeah.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac.
That was horrible.
Madam Speaker, Bill C-18 on online information requires web giants to pay their fair share to local media when they benefit from their work. It makes sense. But Facebook doesn't want that. Oh, no. When Australia presented a similar bill, they even tried to bully them. And they're doing the same thing today in Canada and California. We found out that Facebook is doubling down on its bullying tactics by preventing thousands of Canadians from accessing news. I'd like to know how the government plans to react to this bullying tactic, which is grotesque. The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for Pontiac for her question and hard work. Once again, Facebook wants to bully Canadians, and now they're going to block news on their platform for many Canadians. That's bullying, just like in a schoolyard. Canadians will get scared and they won't ask to get the system fixed, and they won't ask web giants to pay their fair share. But our door is open to make appropriate changes. We will not, however, let ourselves be bullied. We will demand that web giants do their fair share, and that's the end of it.
Like Frontenac Kingston.
Madam Speaker, Corrections Canada tells us that offenders who find jobs in the community are 3 times less likely to reoffend. This is true, but it's also irrelevant because there is zero statistical correlation between participation in CSC's job training programs and getting post-incarceration work. Here's why. Instead of recognized third-party vocational certifications, CSC issues informal statements of achievement that have all the authority of the ribbons issued at a children's bicycle decorating contest. Will the government fix this problem?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, you know, the opposition has a wonderful opportunity by listening to what the consultations and the output that came from the consultations with the provinces and Ottawa on bail reform. We have legislation that is here that the Conservative Party could support, and by doing that, they'll be supporting the provinces and the legislation, which would be good for all Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Madam Speaker, Liberals have wreaked havoc in our immigration system. Canadians and prospective Canadians who play by the rules are being forced to wait for years, while the integrity of our system is threatened by unscrupulous consultants and an incompetent government. Conservatives have moved a motion at the Immigration Committee to get to the bottom of a scandal in which the government issued visas based on fake college acceptance letters and then tried to punish the victims instead of the scammers. So my question is for the chair of the Immigration Committee. After Liberals and New Democrats shut down debate on this issue, does the committee have plans to study the impact on students of the government's failure to properly enforce Canada's immigration laws? Great question.
He sounds sick.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much.
That we take these allegations of fraud very seriously. For these students,
as serious as the Chinese police stations.
I recognize the person. I recognize the individual that gets up to answer the question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. For the opposition, who might want to listen to the answer,
that we take these allegations very seriously. For these students who may have been victims of fraud, we want to make it clear. They can benefit from full due process. We're also cracking down on these bad actors who prey on our most vulnerable. Madam Speaker, we'll always be there for these vulnerable students, and we will be relentless in our efforts to clamp down on these dishonest consultants.
Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker, Logan Hunter and Jackson Joseph had their lives taken in the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. Because of the reckless criminal actions of one man, 16 people are dead and 13 more were injured. The perpetrator, a non-citizen, is fighting to stay in Canada. Logan and Jackson's parents want to know that if committing a crime of this consequence isn't enough to get someone deported, then what is?
Nothing. You don't get deported from Canada.
Parliamentary Secretary.
You know what, Madam Speaker, I want to say to those victims, you know, I was a member of the provincial government, actually the former Solicitor General, when these incidents happened. And I think we collectively as Canadians stand very firm on the tragic loss of these wonderful young men who perished. And I can assure the House that every day I think we remember them. We also know that there's a court case in place, and this is the court to make a decision, Madam Speaker. I hate to think that these Conservatives will interfere into a court procedure. Let's allow the
member for Fleetwood Port Kills.
Madam Speaker, taking action on climate change is something we should all be able to agree on. Recently, we saw another major initiative to combat climate change in the Canada Greener Homes program. Can the Minister share with the House the anticipated impact of this program on affordable housing providers and residents, and how will this initiative support our government's commitment to achieving net zero emissions by 2050?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for his important question and advocacy on this important issue. Affordable housing and climate change must go hand in hand. That is why I was pleased recently to announce the launch of the $1.2 billion Canada Affordable Greener Homes program. This initiative will help affordable housing providers serving low and moderate income households.
This guy's a robot.
Energy retrofits on residential rental buildings, reduce operational costs, and greenhouse emissions at the same time. This will result in an increased quality of life for residents while contributing to climate change.
He sounds like my grade 8 history teacher.
Housing affordable.
Like it just puts me to sleep.
Looks like.
The honourable member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Madam Speaker,
As communities from coast to coast to coast face wildfires and flooding, Canadians need this government to step up and do more.
She's got a pride thing around her wrist.
The government already provided a $100 million watershed security fund to proactively protect from extreme weather events. And the Liberal government needs to do the same. Will this government show the same leadership as British Columbia on water and match at minimum their $100 million watershed security fund?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. Obviously, we see how important it is to face climate change, considering the number of forest fires we currently have. Our government is closely following the fires during fire season. We don't want to overrun local capacity. We're ready to offer federal assistance, and we encourage Canadians to follow the advice and alerts from local authorities.
Yes, relying on the government works out.
Provinces and territories.
So good.
Thank you.
Member Kitchener Centre.
Madam Speaker, it's been 2 weeks now since the Senate strengthened and passed Bill C-22, the Canada Disability Benefit Act. Yet
go hug a tree, buddy.
The party has prioritized 6 or 7 government bills ahead of it. Canadians with disabilities continue to disproportionately live in poverty across the country. They need to see action. When will the Liberals bring C-22 back to the floor of this House so it can be urgently passed into law?
I would rather see Maxime Bernier take his spot, the Green Party's spot.
Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for this important question. In the spirit of nothing without us, we are continuing to move forward with historic investments and actions that will improve the social and economic inclusion of millions of Canadians with disabilities. In February, Bill C-22, the Act to establish the Canada Disability Benefit, was unanimously adopted by this House. On May 18th, Bill C-22 was adopted with amendments in the Senate and has now been sent back to this House for consideration. This bill remains a top priority for us, and we have every intention of dealing with this bill as quickly as possible. We are working with all parties to get this important
time is up.
legislation passed.
J'ai un point d'ordre, l'honorable député de Mégantic-Clair.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Clairable, thank you very much. Madam Speaker, during question period I rose because of an issue of interpretation.
It's over. Yeah, now it's point of orders. All right, everybody, that's it. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for the memberships. I appreciate your attention on Friday. Normally, question period is actually earlier. It starts at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is 8 a.m. Pacific Standard, where I am. So I just stream it the same time, Monday to Friday. We got a few more weeks before they take a break for the summer. So same thing every day. Around 11:15, 11:20 a.m. PST. So 2, 11, 12, 1, 2. So 2 p.m. EST, if that's where you are. And that's where we're going to end it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give a like and subscribe. We're almost at 200 likes. We're almost at 200 likes on the stream of like quite a few thousand people stop by. So if you can just make sure that you hit that like button, that would be absolutely much appreciated. And stay tuned for a bunch of clips, and stay tuned on Mistersunshinebaby channel, which is who I am. You might recognize me from there. A lot of videos are going to be coming out today. Peace and love, everybody. I'll see you guys Monday, same time for question period.